Luna pressed her palm against the cold metal wall of her crashed ship and felt the vibrations of a dying engine beneath her fingertips. The emergency lights flickered red and amber across her face as she checked the navigation console one final time. Every screen showed the same message in glowing letters that made her stomach twist with fear. Critical systems failure. Life support at 15%. No rescue signal detected. She had been a stellar cartographer for the Earth Space Agency, and her mission was supposed to be simple: map the uncharted regions of the Andromeda Corridor and return home with data that would help future colonists. But something had gone wrong during the jump through hyperspace. The coordinates had shifted and the ship had been pulled off course by a gravitational anomaly that the sensors never detected. When she finally dropped out of hyperspace, the ship was damaged beyond repair and falling toward an unknown planet. The crash had been violent. Luna remembered the way the ship had screamed as it tore through the atmosphere, and how the safety harness had cut into her shoulders as the vessel slammed into the ground. She remembered the smell of burning circuits and the taste of blood in her mouth. Then everything had gone dark. When she woke up, the ship was half buried in crystalline soil and surrounded by trees that seemed to be made of silver and glass. The sky above was purple and two moons hung like pearls against the strange colored heavens. She was alone and stranded on a world that should not exist. Luna pulled herself through the wreckage and salvaged what she could: a survival pack with protein bars and water purification tablets, a medical kit with antibiotics and bandages, her personal data pad that somehow still worked, and in the cargo bay behind a collapsed bulkhead she found something that made her heart skip. 2 cryostasis pods were still functioning. She had forgotten about them because they were not listed on her official manifest. A friend in the biology department had asked her to transport some specimens to a research station, and Luna had agreed without asking too many questions. Now she stared at the pods and saw 2 small shapes curled inside the frosted glass. They looked like lizards, but their scales glimmered with colors that shifted from emerald to gold. They had wings folded against their backs and small horns that curved from their skulls. Luna had seen pictures of creatures like this in ancient Earth mythology, but she had never believed they were real. Dragons. She did not know how her friend had acquired them or where they came from, but they were alive and the pods were failing. Luna made a choice that would change everything. She opened the pods. The first hatchling tumbled out into her arms and immediately sneezed a small puff of smoke. It was the size of a cat with scales that burned red and orange like living fire. The second hatchling was larger and its scales were deep blue and silver like a storm cloud. Both of them looked at her with intelligent eyes that seemed far too aware for newborn creatures. Luna named them Ember and Storm. She fed them from the emergency protein paste in her survival kit, and they ate with enthusiasm that suggested they had been hungry for a very long time. Ember curled up in her lap and purred like a contented cat, while Storm explored the crashed ship with curiosity. They seemed to understand that she had saved them, and they stayed close to her as she set up a shelter among the wreckage. The first night on the alien world was terrifying. Strange sounds echoed through the crystalline forest, and shadows moved between the glass-like trees. Luna held a makeshift weapon and kept the hatchlings close. Ember generated enough heat to keep them warm, and Storm seemed to sense danger before it arrived. Together they survived until morning. On the 3rd day, the elves found her. Luna was trying to repair the communication array when she heard footsteps that made no sound. She turned and saw figures emerging from the forest like ghosts made solid. They were tall and impossibly beautiful, with silver hair that flowed like water and eyes that glowed with inner light. They wore armor made of materials Luna could not identify and carried weapons that hummed with energy. The leader stepped forward and spoke in a language Luna did not understand. His voice was musical and cold at the same time. He gestured at the crashed ship and then at Luna herself. The meaning was clear: you do not belong here. Luna raised her hands to show she meant no harm, but Ember and Storm moved to her sides and growled. The elves stepped back in shock, and their hands went to their weapons. The leader barked an order, and his soldiers aimed at the dragons. Luna threw herself between them and shouted in every language she knew. The leader held up his hand, and his soldiers lowered their weapons. He studied Luna with eyes that seemed to see through her, and then he spoke again. This time Luna heard one word she recognized because it was universal across every culture she had ever studied: human. The elves took her to their city, and it was the most beautiful thing Luna had ever seen. Silverwind rose from the forest like a crown of crystal and light. Towers spiraled toward the purple sky and bridges of silver connected them in graceful arcs. Water flowed upward in fountains that defied gravity, and gardens floated in the air filled with flowers that sang. The elves moved through their city with grace that made Luna feel clumsy and out of place. They brought her before their queen. Queen. Celeste sat on a throne carved from a single piece of moonstone, and her beauty was so intense it almost hurt to look at her. She wore robes that seemed to be woven from starlight, and a crown of silver thorns rested on her head. Her eyes were the color of winter ice and just as cold. The queen spoke in the elven language, and an advisor translated into broken English. The elves knew of humans because ancient texts spoke of a race that conquered the stars through ambition and violence. The text said humans were dangerous and should be avoided. But here was a human who had fallen from the sky and survived. The queen wanted to know why. Luna explained her mission and the accident that brought her here. She showed them her data pad with images of Earth and the colonies beyond. She told them about the ship malfunction and the crash. She asked for help to repair her vessel or send a message to her people. The queen listened and then made her decision. Luna could stay in Silverwind as a guest, but she must never leave the city without permission. She would be watched at all times, and the dragons must be controlled or they would be destroyed. Luna agreed because she had no other choice. They gave her quarters in a tower that overlooked the city and assigned guards to watch her door. The elves were not cruel, but they were not friendly either. They feared her and what she represented. Only one elf showed her kindness. Prince Cade was the queen's only son, and he was different from the others. While most elves avoided Luna, he came to her chamber with curiosity in his silver eyes. He asked about the stars and the worlds beyond. He wanted to know everything about humans and their technology. Luna was lonely enough to welcome his visits. Cade brought her books written in the old tongue and tried to teach her the elven language. Luna showed him pictures of Earth with its blue oceans and green forests. She told him about cities that touched the clouds and ships that sailed between planets. She explained how humans had overcome their differences to reach for the stars together. Cade listened with wonder and said his people had lost their ambition long ago. The elves had once been explorers who sailed the seas and climbed the mountains. But after a great war that nearly destroyed them, they had chosen isolation. They built Silverwind and closed themselves off from the rest of the world. They stopped asking questions about what lay beyond their borders. Luna said that sounded like a sad way to live. Cade smiled and said she was right, but change was difficult for his people. The elves lived for thousands of years, and they had seen too many civilizations rise and fall. They believed that safety came from staying still and staying separate. The idea of reaching for the stars terrified them because it meant embracing the unknown, but Cade was not afraid, and that made him unusual among his kind. Over the following weeks, Luna and Cade spent hours together. She taught him about physics and engineering while he taught her about elven magic and culture. They discovered that elven magic and human science were not so different. Both sought to understand the universe and bend it to their will. The methods were different, but the goal was the same. Together, they built something new. Cade brought Luna materials from the royal workshops, and she used them to create a device that combined elven magic crystals with human technology. The device could capture starlight and transform it into sound. When they activated it for the first time, the tower filled with music that seemed to come from the heavens themselves. The elven court was amazed and demanded to see the device. Luna and Cade presented it before the queen and the assembled nobles. The music played, and for a moment the cold faces of the elves softened with wonder. They had not heard anything like it in centuries. But the high priestess was not pleased. She was an ancient elf with eyes like black holes and a voice that could freeze blood. She declared that mixing human technology with elven magic was forbidden by the old laws. She said Luna was corrupting the prince and leading him away from tradition. She demanded that Luna be exiled immediately. The queen considered this, and Luna felt her heart sink. But Cade stepped forward and spoke with authority that surprised everyone. He said Luna had done nothing wrong, and Luna woke to the sound of bells ringing across Silverwind, and she knew immediately that something was wrong. The bells only rang during emergencies or when the city was under threat. She rushed to her balcony and saw elven soldiers running through the streets below with weapons drawn. In the distance beyond the city walls, dark smoke rose against the purple sky. Ember and Storm were instantly alert, and their scales bristled with tension. Storm moved to the edge of the balcony and spread his wings, which had grown considerably over the past months. He was now the size of a large dog, and his strength had increased with his size. Ember remained smaller, but her fire burned hotter, and she could melt steel with a single breath. The door to Luna's chamber burst open, and Cade rushed in without his usual courtesy. His face was pale and his silver eyes were wide with fear. He grabbed Luna's hand and pulled her toward the door. He said they needed to leave immediately because something terrible had emerged from the Forbidden Zone. The Forbidden Zone was an area beyond the city that even the elves avoided. Ancient texts spoke of creatures that dwelled there and machines left behind by a civilization that existed before the elves. Most elves believed the stories were myths meant to keep children from wandering too far, but Cade said the myths were real and something had awakened. They ran through the tower and down spiral staircases while dragons followed close behind. Other elves fled in the opposite direction, and their faces showed panic that Luna had never seen before. The proud immortal beings who had seemed so confident and superior were now terrified like anyone else. Cade led them to the royal armory and used his authority to access weapons that were normally forbidden. He handed Luna a sword made of crystalline metal that hummed with energy. He said the blade could cut through almost anything and Luna should not hesitate to use it. He armed himself with a bow that shot arrows of pure light. Outside the tower, the city was in chaos. Elven guards formed defensive lines around the main gates while civilians ran for shelter. The queen stood on the highest rampart giving orders in a voice that cut through the noise. The high priestess was beside her chanting spells that created shimmering barriers of magical energy. Then Luna saw what had caused the panic. Creatures poured from the Forbidden Zone like a nightmare made real. They were mechanical beasts built from dark metal and corrupted magic. Some walked on four legs like wolves made of steel with jaws that sparked with electricity. Others flew on wings of razor-sharp blades. The largest ones stood 20 feet tall and crushed the crystalline trees beneath their feet. The elven guards fired arrows and cast spells, but the mechanical beasts kept coming. For every one they destroyed, 2 more took its place. The defensive lines began to collapse as guards fell back toward the city walls. Cade said the ancient texts called them the Corrupted, and they were weapons created by the old civilization that once ruled this world. The old civilization had destroyed itself in a great war, and the Corrupted had been sleeping underground for thousands of years. Something had woken them, and now they were programmed to destroy anything living. Luna watched the battle and felt her training take over. She had served in the Earth Defense Force before becoming a cartographer, and she knew how to fight. She also knew that the elves were using the wrong tactics. They were fighting defensively when they should be attacking the source. She told Cade they needed to reach the Forbidden Zone and find whatever was controlling the Corrupted. If they could shut down the central command, the beasts would stop. Cade said it was suicide, but Luna argued they had no choice. The city would fall if they did nothing. Cade looked at her with an expression that combined fear and admiration. He said she was right, but they could not go alone. He gathered a small group of elite guards who were willing to follow them. The queen saw what they were planning and commanded them to stop. Cade ignored his mother for the first time in his life and led the group toward the gates. Storm and Ember launched themselves into the air and attacked the Corrupted with fire and claws. Storm had learned to generate lightning from his breath, and he used it to short-circuit the mechanical beasts. Ember's fire melted their armor and exposed their internal mechanisms. The dragons fought with fury that made even the Corrupted seem to hesitate. Luna and Cade fought side by side as they pushed through the enemy lines. The crystalline sword in Luna's hands moved like it was alive and guided by its own intelligence. It cut through the Corrupted with ease and left sparking ruins in her wake. Cade's arrows of light pierced weak points in the enemy armor with precision that came from centuries of practice. The elite guards protected their flanks and created a path toward the Forbidden Zone. They moved as a unit with the kind of coordination that only came from fighting together for decades. Luna realized these were not ordinary soldiers, but members of an ancient order dedicated to protecting the royal family. They reached the edge of the Forbidden Zone, and Luna saw ruins that stretched to the horizon. Massive structures lay broken and half-buried in the crystalline soil. The architecture was neither human nor elven, but something else entirely. The old civilization had been builders on a scale that rivaled Earth's greatest achievements. In the center of the ruins stood a tower that pulsed with sickly green light. Corrupted beasts emerged from openings at its base in an endless stream. Cade said that must be the command center, and if they could reach it, they might be able to shut down the entire army. But between them and the tower stood hundreds of corrupted. Luna made a decision that terrified and thrilled her at the same time. She told Cade to take the guards and create a distraction, while she and the dragons made a direct assault on the tower. Cade started to argue, but Luna cut him off. She said this was what she had trained for and she needed him to trust her. Cade looked into her eyes and something passed between them that went beyond words. He nodded and kissed her quickly before turning to lead the guards in a flanking maneuver. Luna was left stunned for a moment, but then Storm nudged her with his massive head and brought her back to reality. She climbed onto Storm's back and held tight to the spines along his neck. Ember flew beside them as they launched into the air and dove toward the tower. The corrupted noticed them immediately, and mechanical beasts with wings rose to intercept. The sky filled with enemies. Storm twisted through the air with grace that seemed impossible for his size. He dodged energy blasts and razor-sharp projectiles while Luna held on with all her strength. Ember darted in and out of the enemy formations and left burning wreckage falling toward the ground. The dragons worked together like they shared a single mind. Luna drew her crystalline sword and slashed at corrupted that came too close. The blade cut through metal wings and sent beasts spiraling down. Her heart pounded with adrenaline and fear, but also with something else. She felt alive in a way she had not felt since leaving Earth. This was what she was meant to do. They reached the tower and crashed through a window near its top. Luna rolled as she hit the floor and came up with her sword ready. The interior of the tower was filled with machinery that hummed with malevolent energy. Screens showed images of Silverwind and the advancing corrupted army. This was definitely the command center, but they were not alone. A figure stepped from the shadows and Luna recognized it immediately. The High Priestess stood before them with eyes that glowed with the same sickly green light as the tower. Her face was twisted into an expression of hatred and madness. She spoke in the Elven language, but her voice was distorted and wrong. Ember growled and Storm positioned himself between Luna and the Priestess. Luna demanded to know what was happening. The Priestess laughed and switched to broken English. She said the elves had become weak and complacent. They had forgotten their power and their purpose. She had found the old technology and learned to control it. She would use the corrupted to destroy Silverwind and rebuild the elven civilization as it should be, strong and pure and without the corruption of outsiders like Luna. Luna realized the Priestess had been planning this since the day she arrived. The old elf had seen Luna as a threat to the traditional ways and had decided to eliminate her, along with anyone who supported change. She had awakened the corrupted and was using them as weapons against her own people. The Priestess raised her hands and machinery around them came to life. Mechanical arms reached for Luna with claws meant to tear and crush, energy weapons charged with deadly light. The Priestess said Luna would die first and then Cade and then the Queen. The elven civilization would be reborn in fire. Luna had faced many dangers in her life, but this was different. The Priestess was not just an enemy, but someone consumed by fanaticism and corrupted by the ancient technology. She had become something more machine than elf and her power was immense. But Luna had dragons. Storm unleashed a blast of lightning that struck the Priestess and sent her flying backward. Ember melted the mechanical arms before they could reach Luna. The two dragons attacked with coordination that came from months of fighting together. They knew each other's movements and worked as one. The days following the battle were filled with grief and rebuilding. Luna walked through the streets of Silverwind and saw the damage the corrupted had caused. Crystalline buildings lay shattered like broken glass and gardens that once floated in the air now burned on the ground. The elves worked to repair their city, but their faces showed a sadness that Luna had not seen before. They had believed themselves safe behind their walls in isolation, but the attack had proven them wrong. The death toll was devastating. 300 elven guards had fallen defending the city, and twice that number of civilians had died when buildings collapsed. For a people who lived thousands of years, each loss was profound. The elves held funeral ceremonies that lasted for days, and their songs of mourning echoed through the broken streets. Luna attended the ceremonies and felt the weight of every death. She knew that if she had not crashed on this world, the High Priestess might never have been driven to such desperate actions. The old elf had seen Luna as a threat to everything she believed in, and had been willing to destroy her own people to preserve tradition. Luna understood fanaticism, but she had never expected it from beings as ancient and supposedly wise as the elves. Cade found her standing alone in a memorial garden where names of the fallen were carved into crystal stones that glowed with soft light. He put his hand on her shoulder and said none of this was her fault. The priestess had been corrupted by fear and hatred long before Luna arrived. The ancient technology had merely given her the power to act on her madness, but Luna was not convinced. She said that maybe the elves were right to fear humans. Everywhere humans went, they brought change, and change often meant conflict. Perhaps she should have died in the crash or been exiled when she first arrived. Perhaps the galaxy would be better if humans stayed on Earth and left other civilizations alone. Cade turned her to face him, and his silver eyes blazed with intensity. He said that kind of thinking was exactly what the priestess wanted. Isolation and fear had nearly destroyed the elves. Luna had shown them something different. She had shown them courage and innovation and the willingness to fight for others. She had saved their city when their own leaders could not. If that was what humans brought to the galaxy, then the elves needed more of it, not less. Luna felt tears on her face and realized she was crying. Cade pulled her close and held her while she wept. They stood together in the Garden of the Dead, and something shifted between them. What had been friendship and mutual respect became something deeper. They had fought together and nearly died together. They had seen each other at their worst and best, and now they could not imagine being apart, but there were laws that forbade what they were beginning to feel. The Elven Council convened to decide the fate of the High Priestess and to determine what should be done with the ancient technology. Luna was summoned to testify about what happened in the tower. She stood before the assembled nobles and the Queen and told them everything. She described how the priestess had used the old machines to control the corrupted army. She explained how the ancient technology combined with elven magic to create something dangerous and unstable. She recommended that all the ruins in the Forbidden Zone be sealed permanently. The council listened and argued among themselves in the elven language. Some wanted the technology preserved for study, while others demanded it be destroyed. The Queen remained silent through most of the debate, but her eyes never left Luna. Finally, she raised her hand for silence and made her decree. The High Priestess would be exiled to a remote island where she would live out the rest of her immortal life alone with her thoughts. The ancient technology would be sealed away and guarded by a special order of warriors, sworn to prevent anyone from accessing it again, and Luna would be granted full citizenship in Silverwind with all the rights and privileges that came with it. She was no longer a prisoner or guest, but a member of their society. The council erupted in protest, but the Queen's word was absolute. She said Luna had earned this honor through blood and courage. The fact that she was human no longer mattered. Character was not determined by species, but by actions. Cade stood and applauded his mother's decision. Other younger elves joined him, but the older nobles remained silent and their faces showed disapproval. Luna realized she had won a battle, but not the war. There would always be those who resented her presence and what she represented. The Queen approached Luna after the council dissolved and spoke to her privately. She said that Luna should know something important. There was an old law that forbade relationships between elves and outsiders. The law existed to preserve the purity of elven bloodlines and had stood unchallenged for 10,000 years. The Queen had seen the way Luna and Cade looked at each other. She wanted Luna to understand that any romantic relationship between them would violate this sacred law and result in exile for both. Luna felt her heart sink, but she kept her face neutral. She thanked the Queen for the warning and said she understood. The Queen studied her for a long moment and then said something unexpected. She said laws were created by people and could be changed by people, but change took time and the support of the council. If Luna truly cared for her son, she should be patient and not do anything that would force the Queen's hand. It was not permission, but it was not quite a threat either. Luna understood that the Queen was caught between her duty to tradition and her love for her son. The warning was meant to protect them both. Luna told Cade about the conversation and he was furious. He said his mother had no right to control his heart or dictate who he could love. He said the old laws were unjust and needed to be abolished. He wanted to challenge the council directly and demand they change the traditions that had kept the elves isolated and afraid for so long. But Luna asked him to wait. She said rushing into confrontation would only make things worse. They needed to show the elves that humans and elves could work together and build something better than either could alone. They needed to win hearts and minds, not just arguments. Change would come, but it had to come gradually or it would be rejected violently. Cade reluctantly agreed, but Luna could see the frustration in his eyes. He was young by elven standards, despite having lived for over 2 centuries. He had the passion and impatience of youth combined with the knowledge and power of age. It was a dangerous combination. They decided to focus on rebuilding the city and helping the elves recover from the attack. Luna used her engineering knowledge to design new defensive systems that combined elven magic with human technology. The guards were initially suspicious, but after seeing the prototypes work, they became enthusiastic supporters. Soon, Luna was training elven engineers in concepts they had never considered. Storm and Ember became celebrities in Silverwind. The elves had feared the dragons at first, but after seeing them fight to defend the city, they developed a grudging respect. Children would gather to watch the dragons fly and beg Luna for rides. She occasionally obliged under careful supervision. Storm enjoyed the attention while Ember remained aloof and selective about who she allowed near. The dragons had grown considerably since the crash. Storm was now the size of a horse and his wingspan stretched nearly 30 feet. His scales had deepened to a blue so dark it was almost black with silver highlights that crackled with electrical energy. Ember had remained smaller but more compact and her scales glowed like hot coals. Both dragons showed intelligence that went far beyond animal instinct. They understood speech and seemed to grasp complex concepts. Luna wondered what they truly were and where they had come from. Months passed and Luna's life in Silverwind fell into a routine that was almost comfortable. She had her own workshop in one of the towers where she could experiment with combining human and elven techniques. She taught classes to young elves who wanted to learn about the stars and other worlds, and she spent her evenings with Cade walking through the gardens or sitting on balconies, watching the twin moons rise. They were careful not to show too much affection in public, but in private they were inseparable. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. They debated philosophy and science and magic. They shared their hopes and fears, and slowly, inevitably, they fell completely in love. Luna knew it was dangerous, but she could not help herself. Cade was unlike anyone she had ever known. He combined the wisdom of centuries with genuine curiosity about the universe. He challenged her ideas and pushed her to think differently. He was kind and brave, and when he smiled at her, she felt like the only person in the world who mattered. Cade felt the same way. He told her that in all his long life he had never met anyone like Luna. She had shown him that the universe was vast and full of wonder. She had made him question everything he thought he knew. She had given him hope for a future that went beyond the walls of Silverwind. He loved her with an intensity that scared him. They both knew they were breaking the law with every private moment they shared. But they told themselves they were not hurting anyone. They were just two people who had found something rare and precious. They would deal with the consequences when they had to, but secrets have a way of being discovered. The separation from Cade felt like losing part of herself. Luna threw herself into her work to avoid thinking about what she had lost. She spent long hours in her workshop designing new technologies and training elven engineers. She took Storm and Ember on flights far from the city where no one could see her cry. She tried to convince herself that she could live with just friendship and distant smiles across crowded rooms. But it was not enough. Cade was equally miserable. He attended council meetings with a hollow expression and performed his royal duties with mechanical precision. He argued for reforms and pushed for changes that would open Silverwind to the wider galaxy. But his heart was not in it. The other elves noticed the change in their prince and whispered among themselves about what had broken his spirit. The queen watched her son suffering and felt torn between duty and love. She had warned Luna about the laws and had tried to protect them both, but seeing Cade fade before her eyes was more painful than she had anticipated. She began to question whether the old traditions were truly worth preserving if they caused such anguish. 3 months after the council's decree, Luna received a message on her datapad. The communication system she had built finally made contact with Earth. The signal had taken years to reach human space, but a response had come back. The Earth Space Agency had received her distress beacon and was sending a rescue ship. They would arrive in approximately 6 months. Luna stared at the message and felt emotions she could not name. She had dreamed of going home since the day she crashed. Earth meant safety and familiarity and a return to the life she had known. But it also meant leaving Cade and the elves and the strange, beautiful world she had come to love. It meant abandoning Storm and Ember, who had become more than pets. They were family. She told the Queen about the message, and the Queen received the news with mixed feelings. She said she was glad Luna would be able to return to her people, but also sad to see her go. Luna had brought changes to Silverwind that would last for generations. She had shown the elves that the universe held wonders they had forgotten. Her presence would be missed. Luna asked if she could tell Cade about the rescue ship. The Queen hesitated, but then agreed. She said Luna deserved the chance to say goodbye properly. The restrictions on their contact would be lifted for the remaining time before the ship arrived. When Cade heard that Luna would be leaving, he felt like the ground had opened beneath his feet. He had known she would eventually return to her people, but 6 months felt both too long and not long enough. He wanted to spend every remaining moment with her, but he also wanted time to stop so she would never have to leave. They met in secret in one of the abandoned towers on the edge of the city. It was the same tower where they had first built the Starlight music device. Cade brought wine made from crystalline fruits, and Luna brought recordings of Earth music. They sat together on the balcony and watched the sunset paint the sky in colors that existed nowhere else. Cade said he had been thinking about the future and had made a decision. When the rescue ship arrived, he wanted to go with Luna. He would leave Silverwind and his title and everything he had ever known. He would see the stars that he had only dreamed about. He would go to Earth and meet other humans and learn about the vast civilization Luna had described. He would do all of this because the alternative was losing her forever. Luna felt her heart leap with hope, but then reality crashed down. She said Cade could not abandon his people. He was the prince and future king. The elves needed him, especially now when they were learning to change and grow. His mother would be devastated. And there was no guarantee that Earth would welcome an alien refugee, even one who was royalty on another world. Cade said he had considered all of this, and his decision remained unchanged. His people would survive without him. They had survived for thousands of years before he was born, and would continue long after. But he would not survive losing Luna. He loved her more than duty or tradition or the throne. He would give up everything to be with her. Luna wanted to say yes more than anything, but she forced herself to think clearly. She said they needed to consider this carefully and not make rash decisions. 6 months was enough time to plan properly. They would talk to the Queen and the Council. They would try to find a solution that did not require Cade to abandon his responsibilities. And if no solution could be found, then they would make the hard choice together. Cade agreed reluctantly, and they spent the rest of the evening talking about possibilities and dreams. They imagined a future where elves and humans worked together to explore the galaxy. They planned expeditions to discover new worlds and missions to establish trade between civilizations. They built castles in the air and pretended that reality would not tear them apart. The next morning, Luna requested an audience with the Queen. She stood before the throne and made a proposal that shocked everyone who heard it. She said that instead of leaving when the rescue ship arrived, she would stay in Silverwind permanently. She would renounce her claim to Earth citizenship and become fully elven in law, if not in biology. She would dedicate her life to helping the elves prepare for contact with the wider galaxy, and in exchange she asked for one thing. She asked the Queen to abolish the law that forbade relationships between elves and outsiders. The throne room fell silent. The Queen stared at Luna with an expression that cycled through surprise and consideration, and something that might have been respect. She said Luna's offer was generous but impossible to accept. No human could become truly elven, and renouncing Earth citizenship would leave Luna stateless and without protection. As for changing the ancient laws that required the support of the full council, and such support was unlikely given current attitudes. Luna said she understood, but she had to try. She said love should not be forbidden because of species or tradition. The universe was vast and full of diversity. If civilizations could not learn to accept difference and embrace change, then they would remain isolated and stagnant forever. She had seen what isolation did to the elves, and she did not want to see it continue. The Queen was silent for a long moment. Then she said something unexpected. She asked Luna if she truly loved Cade enough to sacrifice everything. Luna said yes without hesitation. The Queen nodded slowly and said she would think about what Luna had proposed. She dismissed the court and called for a private council of her most trusted advisors. Over the following weeks, strange things began to happen in Silverwind. The Queen invited ambassadors from other elven cities to visit and discuss mutual concerns. She opened the archives and allowed scholars to study the ancient texts that spoke of humans. She encouraged younger elves to experiment with combining magic and technology. She was preparing her people for change even though many did not realize it yet. Cade watched his mother's actions with growing hope. He began to believe that maybe there was a chance for him and Luna after all. But Luna remained cautious. She had learned that the elves moved slowly and valued consensus. Even if the queen supported them, there were powerful forces in the council that opposed any change to tradition. Storm and Ember sensed the tension in the air. The dragons had grown even larger and now required significant space. Storm could carry 2 people easily and Ember's fire burned hot enough to melt stone, but they remained gentle with Luna and protective of both her and Cade. They seemed to understand that their small family was facing a crisis. One night Luna took the dragons flying far beyond Silverwind to a place where the crystalline forest gave way to open plains. The twin moons were full and cast silver light across the landscape. Luna stood on a hillside and looked up at the stars. She found the constellation that marked the direction of Earth and wondered if anyone there was looking back at her. She thought about her life before the crash. She had been a cartographer mapping unknown regions of space. It had been exciting work but also lonely. She had friends and colleagues but no one she truly connected with. She had seen dozens of worlds but never felt at home on any of them. Now she stood on an alien planet millions of light years from Earth and felt more at home than she ever had. Was that love, or was it just fear of going back to loneliness? Luna was still contemplating when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Cade approaching with a smile on his face. He said he had been looking for her and the guards told him she had flown this direction. He asked if she wanted company or if she preferred to be alone. Luna said she always wanted his company. They sat together on the hillside while the dragons hunted in the distance. Cade took Luna's hand and said he had news. His mother had called another council meeting, and this time she had brought proposals to change several old laws, including the one that forbade relationships with outsiders. The debate had been intense, but the queen had been persuasive. She reminded the council that Luna had saved their city and proven herself worthy of citizenship. She argued that the elves could not remain isolated forever and must learn to accept others as equals. She spoke with passion and authority that none could deny. The council had voted to reform the ancient law. By a narrow margin, they had decided that relationships between elves and outsiders would no longer be forbidden. The decision came with conditions. Any such relationship must be approved by the royal family, and the couple must demonstrate genuine commitment. But the absolute prohibition was lifted. Luna felt tears streaming down her face before she realized she was crying. Cade pulled her into his arms and held her tight while the queen watched with an expression that might have been satisfaction. The old noble who had opposed Luna from the beginning stormed out of the chamber in protest, but most of the council remained to witness the moment. The queen approached them and spoke with formal authority. She said that as the first to petition under the new law, Luna and Cade must set an example for others. Their relationship would be scrutinized and judged. They would need to prove that love between species could strengthen rather than weaken their society. But if they were willing to accept that burden, they had her blessing. Cade said they would gladly accept any challenge. Luna nodded in agreement, though her voice was lost to emotion. The queen smiled for the first time since the council had convened and said she looked forward to having Luna as part of the family. Then she turned and left them alone to celebrate their victory. The news spread through Silverwind like wildfire. Reactions were mixed, with younger elves celebrating the progressive decision, while older ones muttered darkly about tradition being abandoned. But even the conservatives had to admit that Luna had earned her place through deeds, not just words. She had saved their city and proven herself worthy of respect. That evening, Luna received another message from the Valkyrie. Captain Rodriguez reported that the ship had entered orbit and was prepared to land at Luna's coordinates. The captain asked if Luna still required rescue or if circumstances had changed. Luna sent back a reply explaining everything that had happened and requesting that the captain come down to meet with the elven leadership. This was an opportunity for formal first contact between humanity and the elves. The next morning, the Valkyrie descended through the purple sky and landed in a field outside Silverwind. The elven guards formed a defensive perimeter, but their weapons were lowered in greeting, not threat. The ship was larger than Luna's crashed vessel and more advanced. It represented the best of human engineering and exploration capability. When the landing ramp extended, Captain Rodriguez emerged in full dress uniform. She was a tall woman with dark skin and sharp, intelligent eyes that took in everything around her. Two security officers flanked her, but they carried no visible weapons. Rodriguez approached the elven delegation with confidence and courtesy. She bowed in the style of diplomatic protocols and introduced herself as a representative of the Earth Space Agency and the United Nations of Earth. The Queen received the captain in the throne room with full ceremony. Luna served as translator, though Rodriguez had brought her own linguistic experts. The captain explained that Earth had been searching for Luna since her disappearance and was relieved to find her alive and well. She expressed gratitude to the elves for sheltering one of their own and offered friendship between their civilizations. The Queen responded with equal formality. She said the elves had been isolated for too long and were ready to rejoin the wider galaxy. Luna had shown them what was possible when different peoples worked together. The Queen proposed a formal alliance between Silverwind and Earth, with Luna serving as the primary liaison. Rodriguez accepted immediately. She said Earth had much to learn from the elves and much to share. The combination of elven magic and human technology could benefit both civilizations. She also mentioned that Earth had laws protecting the sovereignty of indigenous populations. The elves would never be forced to change or give up their culture. Any cooperation would be voluntary and mutually beneficial. The negotiations continued for several days, with Luna helping to bridge the cultural gaps. The elves were fascinated by human technology, while the humans were amazed by elven magic. Scientists from the Valkyrie met with elven scholars to discuss theories and possibilities. Engineers examined the crashed remains of Luna's ship and began planning how to combine the best elements of both civilizations. Storm and Ember became ambassadors in their own right. The Valkyrie's crew had never seen dragons before and were thrilled to interact with them. The dragons seemed to enjoy the attention, and Storm even allowed some of the crew members to examine his scales and study his ability to generate electricity. Ember was more selective but warmed up to a xenobiologist who brought her exotic meats from the ship's stores. Captain Rodriguez took Luna aside one evening and asked about her plans. The captain said Luna was welcome to return to Earth, where she would be celebrated as a hero. The data she had collected before the crash was invaluable, and the Earth Space Agency wanted her to continue her work. But Rodriguez had also observed Luna with Cade and understood the situation. She said Luna could choose to stay if she wanted. Earth would respect that decision. Luna thanked the captain for understanding. She said her heart was torn between two worlds. Earth was her birthplace and held memories of family and friends. But Silverwind had become home in a way she never expected. And Cade was the love she had been searching for all her life without knowing it. She could not imagine leaving him now. Rodriguez nodded and said she had expected that answer. She told Luna that Earth would establish a permanent embassy in Silverwind, and Luna was the obvious choice to serve as ambassador. The position would allow her to stay with Cade while maintaining ties to her homeworld. She would be the bridge between two civilizations and help shape the future of both. It was an enormous responsibility, but Rodriguez believed Luna was up to the challenge. Luna accepted without hesitation. It was the perfect solution to an impossible dilemma. She could have both the life she had built here and connection to the world she came from. She could serve both peoples and help create something greater than either alone. Formal ceremony establishing the embassy took place, under the twin moons, with representatives from both civilizations in attendance. Luna stood between the Queen and Captain Rodriguez while Cade watched with pride. She swore oaths to serve faithfully as ambassador and to work toward peace and prosperity for all. The Queen bestowed upon her the title of Friend of Silverwind, which was one of the highest honors an outsider could receive. Rodriguez presented her with credentials from Earth, officially recognizing her new role. After the ceremony, there was a celebration that lasted through the night. Elves and humans mingled freely for the first time, sharing food and drink and stories. Musicians from both cultures played together, creating sounds that blended elven melodies with human rhythms. Storm and Ember performed aerial displays that left everyone breathless with wonder. It felt like the beginning of something historic. Luna found a quiet moment with Cade on a balcony overlooking the celebration. He put his arm around her shoulders and said he was proud of her. She had accomplished what seemed impossible and brought two worlds together. Luna leaned against him and said she could not have done any of it without him. He had given her reason to stay and fight when leaving would have been easier. Cade said he had something to ask her, and went down on one knee in the traditional elven proposal posture. He pulled out a ring made of crystalline metal woven with silver threads. He said that in all his centuries of life he had never imagined finding someone who understood him so completely. Luna had shown him the stars and given him hope for the future. She had changed him and changed his world for the better. He wanted to spend the rest of his very long life with her as his partner and equal. Would she marry him according to both elven and human customs? Luna said yes before he finished the question. She pulled him to his feet and kissed him while fireworks exploded overhead, launched by enthusiastic humans and elves alike. The crowd below cheered, and Storm and Ember roared their approval into the night sky. The wedding took place 3 months later and combined traditions from both cultures. Luna wore a dress that blended human design with elven materials and sparkled like starlight. Cade wore formal robes in silver and blue that marked him as royalty. The ceremony was conducted by the Queen and Captain Rodriguez, together symbolizing the union of two civilizations as much as two people. Storm and Ember served as honor guards, standing on either side of the couple with their wings spread wide. They had grown to their full size now and were truly magnificent. Storm's wingspan reached 50 feet, and crackles of electricity danced between his scales. Ember burned with inner fire that made the air shimmer around her. Both dragons had proven themselves intelligent, enough to be considered citizens in their own right, and the Elven Council had granted them special status. The celebration that followed the wedding was even larger than the embassy ceremony. Elves from other cities had traveled to witness this historic moment. Humans from Earth sent delegations and gifts. Other alien species that Earth had contact with sent ambassadors curious about the elves and their magic. Silverwind had become a crossroads where different peoples met and learned from each other.